Hi, it's Nick on the 16th of June, continuing this week's theme of, what do we do when we feel like we've lost our purpose? And what I want to share with you today is what I call my most powerful evolutionary question. And it's a question that I ask myself consistently, and it's one of the, I was going to say, biggest tools in my toolkit as a coach and a mentor to people, but when I share it with you in a minute, you'll kind of go, oh, is that the question? But obviously it's the wholeheartedness with which we embrace the question that's the important thing. So this is one of the things I use with most people. I ask this question to see what kind of response I get. But let me just give you the context. I've used the words evolutionary, consciously, because I believe, here's what I think, here's my belief system, if you like, that I would call it our soul is always trying to get our attention, is to get us to move forward, to shed that skin that we were talking about earlier in the week, shed some smaller sense of ourselves so that we can evolve and blossom into more of our innate potential. So it's not something we have to invent. Our soul is always going, here's the next bit. Like when the daffodil comes up under the earth, it was already there. The innateness of it was already underneath. It wanted to now hit the surface and blossom and become a plant and then a flower. So that's the kind of metaphor I use, is something is always wanting to emerge out of each of us. So when we feel like we've lost our sense of purpose, then it heralds a new blossoming. There is something good trying to happen here. I guess that's the bottom line of what I want to say here, is when something runs out, it means there is something new underneath waiting to happen. So here's the question that I use most for myself, to guide myself, if you like, to navigate myself, and I use it with my clients. And it's such a simple question, but it's, for me, an honest question that I often need to take time to answer. And the question is, how will I inspire myself next? So it could be, how will I inspire myself? Because there may be something that's just beckoning you to do it, that by doing it you would inspire yourself. But I also often end with the word next, because sometimes we have been on an inspirational path, and yet that inspiration seems to have dried up a bit. So the next bit kind of presupposes that there is a next bit of inspiration to emerge. So either how will you inspire yourself, or how will you inspire yourself next, are the questions I ask myself, and the questions that I ask most clients at some point in our relationship, usually at the beginning. Because really our coaching relationship is going to be about that question, that something in them is wanting to blossom into their fuller self-leadership, their fuller leadership. And for me, inspiration is the cleanest way to navigate our own blossoming and evolution. I think what inspires us, we can read as our soul speaking to us, if you like. I think that's the language I would use. Our soul wants us to be inspired. We know that the basis of the word inspired is in spirit. So when we feel that we're in spirit, we are in touch with the essence of ourselves. So that's why I think inspiration and evolution go hand in hand, because what would inspire us next is what would put us more in touch with our spirit next, our soul next, the essential nature of us. So that's why I ask people that question, and I'm very aware that sometimes I can ask people that question and their eyes go blank because often people have never been asked to think about that question, or they've never thought about it. So it doesn't compute. It's not something that they think about. So sometimes, I'll give a bit of context, or we'll have a conversation, and then come back to the question and say, so what could inspire you next? So I also use the idea of what could inspire you next, as well as what would inspire you next. And sometimes it's just the tiniest things. A tiny little step is what would inspire them next. Sometimes it might be something big and significant that would inspire them next. But it's using that idea of inspiration to navigate our way forward. So here's what I believe, I guess, is that inspiration is that force that is drawing us forward into blossoming. Just as, the sunlight or some evolutionary force is at work in nature that wants it to come into its fullness, I use the word inspiration for the force that wants us to blossom into our fullness. So by using that question, how will you inspire yourself next? Or even, I might slightly rephrase it and say, what do you think inspiration wants for you next? That can help people access an aspect of themselves that maybe they hadn't been in touch with. So I do find it very powerful, because I think, having been around this block of feeling inspired and on purpose and then losing that at various times, I have a faith now that inspiration is always going to return, even if it's not present. Or perhaps I might even say it in another way, which is inspiration is present, but I'm not in tune with it. And that's how I often think of it. It's maybe inspiration isn't ever-present reality that's right here, right now, wanting to get our attention. And our job is to tune ourselves into it. So therefore, that question of how I could inspire myself next will tune us into listening to what inspiration is already wanting us to hear. So I hope that makes sense. So I know I'm painting a picture here. So let's be clear about the kind of picture I'm painting. The inspiration is always there, trying to get our attention. We're the ones who may not be tuned into it, rather than it not being there. So how we tune into that frequency of inspiration and potentially hear what it is trying to get our attention about, is to ask ourselves the question, what would inspire me next? How could I inspire myself next? Because that, I believe, with our willingness, will open us up to listening to what inspiration has in store for us next. And often, I think always actually, inspiration has something good for us next. It's wanting us to, upgrade our life. It wants us to play a bigger game, be more of our true selves. I do believe that. So what we often hit as soon as we ask that question, though, is what I would call our sense of resistance. So that's what I'll touch on tomorrow in tomorrow's broadcast, is the idea of how to recognise the, if you like, the interplay between inspiration and resistance, because I do think they come as a double act. They come as a pair. So I'll talk about the other half of the double act tomorrow. I'll talk about resistance tomorrow. So I hope that's been helpful about, how we navigate our next chapter of evolution and purpose, by asking ourselves what would inspire us to give ourselves access to what I believe inspiration is wanting to communicate to us. So I hope that's helpful. Hope it might have resonated something, and if I'd love to hear, if you want to, what is it that you think inspiration is wanting you to do next? For a couple of years, I've been knowing that inspiration has wanted me to step into my leadership more, is to show up and get beyond many of the kind of small and petty fears that I know that I have, like we all have. And I feel like I'm now stepping into a new chapter of my leadership, a new willingness to show up every day and share ideas like I'm doing here. Not just for my own self-aggrandizement, I do love doing it, but I think it's to be of service, to get more inspiring messages out into the world. And I'm willing and able to do that, so I'm showing up to do that. So, hi Meg, I see you've joined live. What I would really love to do is the question that kickstarts my inspiration. Yeah, thank you, brilliant. Because yes, what we love and what inspires us are, I think, to me, are two facets of the same thing. Love and inspiration, I think, go hand in hand. For me, they're almost, like two facets of a diamond. If there is a diamond, they're just facets of it. So great, I love that. Thank you very much. So thank you for joining live, those of you that have joined live, and I'll be back tomorrow with some thoughts on resistance tomorrow. Okay, God bless. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye bye.